wasn't just a boxing match. It was a storm. Two giants, two undefeated champions, and only one spotlight. When Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier finally stood across from each other in the ring, the world stopped to watch. This wasn't just a fight for a belt. It was a clash of identities, beliefs, pride, and legacy. Ali was fierce, loud, clever, and unpredictable.
I predict that when I meet Joe Frazier, this will be like a good amateur fighting a real professional.
Frazier was thunder, quiet, grounded, and devastating.
My predicted fight wouldn't go the distance. I'll stop it.
Stop me, you.
They didn't just punch each other. They punched through politics, race, and culture. And for more than a decade, their names would be carved into boxing history, side by side, toe to toe. This is not just about fights, it's about pain, power, and two men who refused to bow. Madison Square Garden was trembling. Flashbulbs popped. The crowd was packed with movie stars, world leaders, and fans screaming loud enough to shake the floor. Everyone awaited what would happen when the self-proclaimed greatest took on the relentless, undisputed champion. Ali entered like a performer, calm and cocky, floating on his feet. But this wasn't the Ali who had danced past Liston. He had been out of the ring for 3 years, banned because he wouldn't go to war. Frazier had been busy tearing through opponents with his crushing left hook. He wasn't interested in poetry. He wanted destruction. From the first bell, it was war. Ali started sharp, landing jabs, talking trash, trying to take control early. But Frazier, he kept coming. Round after round, he chopped away at Ali's body. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. By the 11th, the crowd knew this was something different. In the 15th, Frazier delivered the punch that would define the night, a left hook that dropped Ali cold to the canvas. Ali got up, but the decision was clear. Frazier had won. The champ stayed the champ. The world had witnessed not just a fight, but a warning. This rivalry was far from over. As the lights dimmed and the crowd spilt into the New York night, there was a strange silence in the air. Not of disappointment, but disbelief. The invincible Ali had been beaten, and Frazier stood tall, not just as a champion, but as the man who had cracked the myth. But no one left thinking it was over. Everyone knew something darker, deeper, and more brutal had just begun. This wasn't the end of a fight. It was the birth of a war that would rage for years, with pride, legacy, and blood on the line. Ali wasn't built to accept defeat. For 3 years, the loss to Frazier sat like fire in his chest. He told anyone who'd listen, he was still the real champion. So when the rematch came, it wasn't about belts, it was personal.
I told you, I'm the real champion. I told you, I'm the champion of the world.
This time, both men had something to prove. The lead-up was heated. Ali attacked Frazier's image. He called him names, questioned his intelligence, and mocked his style. But behind the scenes, Ali trained like a man possessed. He wasn't going to lose again. Not to the same man, not twice. Frazier had lost the heavyweight title to George Foreman by then, but he was still dangerous, still tough, still throwing that hook like it could shatter mountains. But this fight was different. Ali had learned. He didn't dance all night. He tied Frazier up. He leaned on him. He made it ugly and tactical. For 12 brutal rounds, the two traded blows in a chess match laced with violence. No knockdowns this time, just grit, sweat, and punishment. When the final bell rang, the judges gave the victory to Ali. The score was 1-1, but no one was satisfied. Not Frazier, not Ali, not the world. Everyone knew what had to happen next. They had settled nothing. If anything, the tension had only grown. Ali had avenged his loss, but it didn't feel like redemption. Frazier walked away seething, convinced the judges had robbed him. Ali strutted, smiled, and shouted to the cameras. But even he knew the truth. This was no clean ending. It was a pause, a breath before the storm. Two men, two giants, now tied in blood and bruises. The score was even, but the hatred was not. The world didn't want peace. It wanted a decision, a final act. And it was coming in fire, pain, and the most brutal fight the sport would ever know. It was already boiling before the first punch was thrown. Manila was hot, brutally hot. In the ring, it was a furnace. Outside it, the media frenzy had turned the final fight into a global event. Ali and Frazier weren't just opponents now. They were enemies. Ali had turned up the taunts, called Frazier ugly, a gorilla, even a traitor. Frazier hated him for it. This time, it wasn't just competition. It was hate. Pure, sweaty hate. From the opening bell, both men came out swinging. Ali tried to box, but Frazier walked through the jabs like a tank, pounding Ali's ribs and head. Ali leaned on the ropes, using his infamous rope-a-dope, but even that couldn't ease the pain. Round after round, they beat each other like it was the last thing they'd ever do. By the 10th, the crowd was silent. Nobody cheered anymore. It was a fight beyond human limits. Ali's vision blurred. Frazier's face was swollen shut. In round 14, Ali landed a final flurry that nearly overtook Frazier's head. Between rounds, Frazier's trainer, Eddie Futch, made the call. No more. Frazier wanted to go on, but he couldn't see. The fight was stopped. Ali collapsed. He had won, but barely. It was the closest thing to dying, he said, and everyone believed him. The Thrilla in Manila wasn't just the end of a trilogy. It was the end of something raw and primal. They had given everything, left nothing behind. Ali, usually full of flair and bravado, sat in his corner like a ghost, barely breathing. Frazier, heartbroken and blind in one eye, had to be held back from charging out again. There were no victory laps, no celebrations, just pain, respect, and a silence that screamed louder than any cheer. This was boxing at its most brutal and beautiful. It wasn't about titles anymore. It was about legacy, pride, and the simple truth that no rivalry would ever be like this again. After Manila, everything changed. Ali was back on top. But the fight had taken something from both men, not just physically, but emotionally. For years, the rivalry haunted them. Frazier never forgave Ali for the insults. He carried that anger for decades. For him, it was more than showmanship. It was personal. Ali, he regretted some of it. Later in life, he called Frazier a great warrior. He knew that without Joe, there would be no Ali, no legacy, no trilogy. They had built each other through pain and punishment. The world saw them as opposites. Ali, the poet with lightning fists, Frazier, the quiet grinder with a hammer for a hand. But in truth, they were mirrors. Both came from nothing. Both fought for everything. And both left pieces of themselves in that ring. Today, their story is a legend. A rivalry that outgrew the sport. A lesson in pride, pain, and perseverance. You can't talk about Ali without Frazier, and you can't honor Frazier without Ali. They made each other immortal. In the end, time did what time always does, it softened the edges. But the scars stayed, not just on their bodies, but in the minds of everyone who watched them go to war. Frazier remained bitter, wounded by the words more than the punches. Ali, slowed by illness and reflection, came to see Frazier not as an enemy, but as a brother in battle. Their fights weren't just sporting events. They were moments that shook the world, where two men turned violence into poetry and hatred into history. They didn't just fight for belts. They fought for legacy, and in doing so, they became giants, forever bound, forever remembered. Some rivalries end when the final bell rings. This one echoed through time. Ali and Frazier gave the world more than fights. They gave us theater, drama, fire. They showed us how greatness is born, not just through victory, but through struggle. If you've never watched those fights, now's your chance. Turn off the lights, turn up the volume, and witness two warriors write history with their fists. You won't just see boxing, you'll feel it in your bones. Because this wasn't just a rivalry, this was the storm that changed everything. Like, subscribe, and share if this gives you chills.